Thank you.
do the roll call.
Yeah.
Okay, we will start with a roll call.
Okay. Dr. Beebe?
Here.
Dr. Beebe is present. Ms. Bophy?
Here.
Ms. Bophy is present. Ms. Bradford?
Here.
Ms. Bradford is present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Mr. Garvey is present. Mr. Gio is absent. Ms. Hill?
Present.
Ms. Hill is present. Mr. Lee?
Here.
Mr. Lee is present. Dr. Moranti? Dr. Moranti is present. Ms. Orange Jones? Ms. Orange Jones is present. Mr. Romer?
I'm here.
Mr. Romer is present. And Ms. Smith? Here. Ms. Smith is present. You do have a quorum.
Thank you. We will begin today with the invocation by Ms. Debbie Shum of the Louisiana Association of Principals, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Marcus Fontenot of the Louisiana Federation of Teachers.
I'm sorry, they were the other way around.
Huh?
They were the wrong order.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So Marcus Fontenot will give the invocation, Debbie Shum will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I apologize. It was seeing if y'all are ready or not. Here.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we pray that you will give us your gift of knowledge, that we might always make the best decision for the good of all school children in Louisiana. We pray that you give us the wisdom to know and define our tasks, the strength to build and refine our educational goals, and the courage to preserve as necessary. We ask for your direction that we might make unselfish decisions for those we serve. We pray that all who are assembled have a safe journey home. We thank you for all your past and future blessings. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Members, before we approve the agenda, I just want to thank you for agreeing to do the meeting as we've done it today. It's unusual, but there's a lot of requests from the legislature the next few days for many people that are here to be testifying, and we did not have a heavy load, and so I appreciate everyone's understanding and your time today. So thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is approval of the agenda.
Second.
There's a motion by Ms. Bradford, seconded by Mr. Garvey. Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
The next item is item 3, approval of the minutes of March 7th, 2014 and March 13th, 2014.
Ms. Orange Jones moves approval.
I move that the board approve the minutes of March 7, 2014, March 13, 2014, amending motion 311 of the March 13, 2014 minutes as follows. On the motion of Mr. Gio, second by Ms. Bophy, the board, reference A, approve the FY14-15 MFP formula as proposed by the LD, amending the language to include the following, and then as the board has it written here, striking the elements that are in red.
And there's a second by Ms. Bradford. Is there any objection?
Object.
Object.
3 objections. Any comment?
Can, Mr. Moon?
Smith, Dr. Beebe, and Ms. Hill.
Mr. Lee.
Can we discuss it a minute?
Sure, absolutely. I will start on, I saw Ms. Smith raise her hand first. I don't know if she want to comment, and then I'll come to you.
Okay, just for clarification, the thing that, and I wasn't here at this meeting, but what is in red was actually, if you'll clarify, was actually in the original formula that was given to the legislature, but what was struck out.
That language was not provided to the legislature.
So what went to the legislature, this is my concern, what went to the legislature was not what was voted on by this body.
The board has in policy allowed the department to make technical amendments where there is no change to the meaning of the language, and in past that, for reasons of spelling, syntax, and diction, has been an issue. In this case, the language literally means the exact same thing as another term in that sentence and is thus redundant, thus it was struck. And if I could just provide context for those who may not recall what exactly happened. When considering the adoption of the formula, the vote was first, the formula was rejected as it was presented because it was a tied vote. Ms. Orange-Jones said that she would not accept a formula that did not include an automatic 2.75% increase for school systems. Thus, staff had to very quickly write the language, and it was staff's impression that the language that was submitted was confusing. And this happens any time in a way that the MFP, this kind of last-minute change is made. I can recall this happening even in my 3 or 4 years. So the language was confusing and it was redundant, so it was just struck so as to be very, very simple and clean language. It is a technical amendment. It does not change the intention of creating an automatic 2.75 if the formula is rejected.
Where is it redundant?
It is redundant in that it says since 2013-14 or since the most recent year in which it was passed. If this formula is to pass, then 2013-14 would have been the last year. So in other words, essentially saying since the last year or since 2013-14 is saying the same thing.
But what happened to 11-12?
11-12 is not written into that formula.
Here's
No,
my...
maybe I may. The number that it is intended to produce is the number 1. The number of years since 2013-14. And thus what you would assume if ever a future formula is adopted, then that year 13-14 would be changed. I would say, for whatever it's worth, that our view is that the lack of clarity poses a risk in communicating to the legislature and to school systems the intent of this provision.
Well, I think there might be, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I
Yeah.
have a concern about voting to approve something in the minutes that was not actually what was voted on, and it does appear to be more than just a grammatical or, a spelling error or a grammatical error. It's not what we wish would have happened. It's not what we hoped happened at the meeting. The minutes reflect exactly what happened at the meeting, and because this was changed afterwards, I have some concern about it. That's the reason I came up with the motion that I did earlier today, because I think it's confusing. I just have a problem with, okay, after everybody leaves, then somebody on staff goes in and strikes something out, so this is what we really meant, and then we send that to the legislature. So I'm just going to object to approving the minutes, and I have one other question. Was letter F voted on in the motion, and was that included in the body of the formula where we tell the legislature about?
No, F is not in the body of the formula.
So we voted on a motion, but that was taken out of the motion and put into a letter.
That's correct.
So that was another augmentation to the motion.
No, it was two separate
Well,
items.
it was a confusing meeting, I can assure you. Okay, well, I just want to object.
If I may, and I appreciate your objection and your concern you brought up earlier today. I don't disagree with re-examining how that's done. I will say this. This was brought to our attention, the officer's attention, when this change was made. The maker of the motion and the second of the motion was asked to review this change their intent. So it wasn't an arbitrary decision. I just wanted you to know that. It doesn't mean I disagree with your sentiment.
I just think we can do things a little cleaner.
I appreciate it. And it is difficult. We do put in the language, just so you'll know, that these changes can be made because we do run up against deadlines with the legislature, and we were up against that deadline. So we had to, get the right language across the street. But to re-examine how that might be done in the future is certainly a legitimate question, and I don't have an issue with it. But I wanted you to know, John didn't just send it across the street without referencing and asking me to check with the board officers and check with the original maker of the motion and the seconder of the motion. So
where are we with the formula at this time? Has it been read into committee?
Been introduced. It's gone through its readings. It will be heard in committee in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Beebe, Dr. Beebe, and then Ms. Hill, and then Ms. Lee.
Well, Mr. Romer, I need clarification regarding the technical edits and adjustments. When I consider technical edits, that's something like commas and addressing punctuation. So does this mean something beyond the technical, like punctuation? I mean, can we just modify?
It's a technical change in that it literally was written poorly. It means the exact same thing as another provision of that sentence, and as such gets in the way of that sentence being read clearly.
Well, I would concur that it's somewhat complex.
Yes.
If it's in writing. I mean, imagine us last meeting when this was read aloud, and I pointed out, I raised objection that, we shouldn't be voting on policy changes or anything without having the information before us. And I certainly commend Ms. Smith for her proposal that we follow proper protocol and that we do things the right way so that it's transparent to all. And, I've been advocating this.
Well, let me, if I may, I don't know that we were saying that proper protocol wasn't followed here. Actually, proper protocol was followed. I think Ms. Smith suggests that we ought to look at that protocol and see if it can be tightened up even more than it is. Now, I think that's the sentiment, and we agree with that sentiment. Certainly, no one likes to be in the position of having to do this. But this certainly meets the definition of a technical edit, did not change the intent of the maker of the motion or the person that made the second. So nonetheless, for us to review the policies is a fine question to ask, and we'll do so. Is there a better way to define this so that it's more clear?
Well, all I'm saying is I'm voting no based on the fact that it was unclear for me during the last meeting. And again, I would agree that the language, when one reads it, is somewhat complex.
May I just add one piece of context, and I should have said this earlier. Certainly, obviously, you have your own policy views on the minutes and that process and its integrity and such. That I recognize that's really the issue at hand. To be fair, this was a formula that originally did not include an additional 2.75% on an annual basis for school systems. The superintendents and the school boards came to the table. They advocated for that change. And while I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ms. Orange-Jones, I believe it was in great part in response to that you introduced this idea. I'm saying that not to say that this no vote would mean you're voting no against that. I know that's not. But I want you to understand that the spirit of this we did in a very brief moment. You're right. But we did it out of a sense of urgency in being responsive to the school boards and the superintendents. And I do want to just say that for the record.
And may I also say, for the record, I don't. The 2.75 was the money that was outside the formula that was actually rolled into that was a line item in the budget last year. Is that correct?
That's not what I'm referring to here. What I'm referring to here is a calculation of the annual cost that allows for that cost to roughly track inflation. So you have a dynamic assessment of cost so that school systems don't get stuck with what they have, at least in part, been stuck with over the last 5 years, which is a static assessment of cost. And this was a specific request from the school systems. The board was responsive to that, and I take responsibility for not writing a perfectly clean sentence. We didn't exactly do that in the brief moment, but I want you to understand that the spirit of this was to acknowledge a concern that is generally one to which I think many on this board are sympathetic.
And I agree. The only thing I want to just be perfectly clear about is that my objection is that I don't want to do anything that would ever indicate that it was any kind of violation of the open meetings law. I have a real passion about making sure that whatever we send out that is voted on reflects exactly what happened in the meeting. And so with that, I understand that y'all were trying to hit a deadline, but I just think we can do it better.
Ms. Hill, and then Mr. Lee, and then Ms. Orange Jones.
I have two questions. For F, the support the additional funding being placed from 2.14 to 15 repeat. To my understanding, that was the original language that was in the motion that failed in regards to Mr. Rowland.
No, we amended, to be clear, when we came back with the 2.75 increase, we also included that language.
But isn't this the language that was originally in the first motion? I mean, what was it read? Just the 2.75? That's all that was.
No, the only part that we're talking about right now, that the objection is the part that's highlighted in red.
No, I understand that. I'm asking a question for clarity for me.
Okay.
In regards to letter F. I remember in the meeting, this was the language that was in the original motion of Mr. Rowland. However, when we went into recess, Ms. Orange Jones wanted to make sure that 2.75 was within the formula. However, next, Mr. Rowland ended up putting the letter F back into this motion, correct?
Mr. Gio, who made the motion, included that section in the motion that he read that the board ultimately voted on. It was incorporated in. Going back, the first motion that was made was amended to include that letter F by Mr. Romer, and then that motion, whatever the process was voted down at the end. This motion that ended up being voted on and approved by the board included that letter F as part of the motion. Mr. Gio read all of this aloud, and then that's what the board voted on.
But F is not part of our official formula to the legislature. We made that clear at this board that we would just include that in our correspondence letter to them. F.
And then my second question is the 2.75%. I know that was one of the major concerns that most of the board members had because we were mandated by the legislature to make sure we got the 2.75% was the end of the formula. However, I hear Superintendent White saying he has stated on numerous occasions that the 2.75% is ended. Could you just, for clarity for me, can you explain what's the difference between the 3,855 plus 2.75% times the $3,855 times the whole number of the school year? Could you explain what's the difference there?
Sorry, the difference between that and what?
Well, the difference is that you told me that the 2.75% is there. I see it written, but in language, and in regards to implementation, is it truly there? Because it looked like it's repeating itself.
Sure. So there's two different things. There is last year's base amount per child, which is $3,855 times 2.75, and then you add that to $3,855. That's like another $100 and change. So you get up to $3,961. And then it says times the number of years since 2013-14. Well, that's 1 year since 2013-14. In other words, this will be the 14-15 year. It's 1 year, so it's times 1. So it's $3,961 times 1. Now, that equals $3,961. Now, let's say that we get to 2015-16, and the legislature has decided not to pass this. And Ms. Smith didn't exactly say that, but she alluded to that kind of possibility earlier. Then it would be 2 years since 2013-14, meaning it would not be $3,961 anymore. It would be more like $4,080. So that's what it is.
Does that clarify, Ms. Hill, your question? Okay. Mr. Lee, and then Ms. Orange Jones.
As I appreciate it, the reason the formula didn't pass is because it did not include an additional 2.75. But the funding by the legislature included an additional 2.75 for this current year.
Not an addition.
In order for that 2.75 to continue being added, there would have to have been a 2.75 additional to everything that had been appropriated up to that point. Ms. Hill? I hope, I'm trying to react and ask questions about what you had just been saying. It looks to me like, Mr. White, when you say it's 3961 times 1, that seems to me it would not add an additional 2.75. So there is no additional 2.75 here. And I thought that's part of what was in the original motion, or the motion that was approved by the board. So,
Well,
I'm
here's
still,
May I make a point here?
I'm still confused
I
about.
don't mind, we were discussing the minutes and the objections to the minutes, which I think we've addressed, and the concerns by Dr. Beebe and Ms. Smith were addressed. We now seem to be debating again, with all due respect, the actual formula. And while I'll let you finish, Mr. Lee, I want to let other members know I'd like us to keep the discussion to this question of the minutes if we could. So
I thought that's what I was doing, but I'll just, at this point, since I don't have clarity, I'm going to say I'd like to be recorded as voting no.
Ms. Orange-Jones.
Until I have better clarity.
What is it you need clarity on? I'm not certain I understand.
maybe I can start from the top and just briefly explain the calculations. Does that work?
Okay.
Okay. So the base per pupil last year and since 2008 has been $38.55.
Okay.
As Ms. Smith alluded to earlier, in the spring of 2013, in a last-minute deal, the legislature added $70 million, not to the formula, but to the appropriation that contains the formula. The governor and a House concurrent resolution both requested that BESE bring that $70 million within the formula for this year. So the 2.75% you see reflected there is that. Thus, is there a net addition in the base per pupil to school systems? No. There is a net addition in aggregate dollars of roughly $80 million. And that is for student count and local taxation, as well as some enhancements to the formula made from the task force. So that was the formula proposed. What it looks like now is netting about an $80 million increase plus, as Ms. Smith said, bringing the $70 million over. It's not an additional 2.75. Then there was an objection to the idea there wasn't a 2.75 sort of stopgap in perpetuity, a hold harmless, a fail-safe. And the board added that back in. So you have essentially a formula that nets an $80 million increase, represents a $150 million increase, and also has in out years a 2.75 growth factor. That's the formula. Does that get to your questions?
Sounds to me like it's still saying there is no additional 2.75. It also seems to be saying that under the previous formula, it had an automatic 2.75 built in.
As does this one.
I don't see how it does when you say there is no additional for this, for the next year.
Because the old formula didn't have an additional 2.75 unless the formula was rejected by the legislature, and then BESE went and made a proposal to the Joint Legislative Committee on Budget and so on, and there was a procedure prescribed within it. That that process has never been actually carried through to develop a 2.75 increase. Last year, the formula was rejected. BESE went to the Joint Legislative Committee on Budget and said, because you have proposed an additional $70 million, we will just accept that as an increase in the MFP. Now, whether the department, and Dr. Beebe, at the meeting, you raised this question. You proposed a substitute motion to add what I believe Mr. Lee is suggesting, which is an additional $70 million. And I went through then 3 scenarios: the high end, which was Dr. Beebe's, the middle, which I believe this represented, and then a smaller one. And, we just talked about the money a little bit at the meeting. And I said that Dr. Beebe's would have netted what I believe to be in excess of $200 million. We now know it would have been $225 million. This is $155 million. And if you took out the 2.75, it would be about $80 million in growth. But that formula has been passed, as Mr. Romer said. That formula is done. That's on the record. That has been sent across. And what was the letter of what we agreed to. The thing that was added was the growth factor. The growth factor in the event that the legislature ever rejects this formula.
And,
Mr. Chairman, call for question.
well, I did ask Ms. Orange-Jones, are you waiving?
I just want to make sure on the record that I do think the technical changes to this particular motion do reflect the intent that I had.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, we have a second, we have objection, right, do those objections still stand?
Yes.
Okay,
Can we roll call vote?
sure, let's do a roll call.
Yes, sir. The motion by Ms. Orange Jones, seconded by Ms. Bradford, to approve the minutes of March 7th and March 13th, 2014, amending motion 3.1.1 of the March 13th, 2014 minutes, striking the language in red under A in your handout. Dr. Beebe?
Yes. I think you want to
You want
vote
no?
Wait, I'm sorry. It's to
It's to approve.
It's to approve the motion.
No.
Okay, Dr. Beebe votes no. Ms. Bophy?
Yes.
Ms. Bophy votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio is absent. Ms. Hill?
No.
Ms. Hill votes no. Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Lee votes no. Dr. Moranti?
Yes.
Dr. Moranti votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Ms. Smith?
No.
Ms. Smith votes no. Mr. Romer, do you wish to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent. The motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, even though I know the vote's been taken, still have a question about what does whole number of years since 2013-14? I'm sorry, what that mean?
The Act 2 judgment by the Supreme Court includes a footnote on page 43 that written by Justice Weimer that says that the old language, which is if the legislature rejects it, then BESE goes to JLCB, they submit a recommendation. If JLCB rejects it, BESE gets 2.75. Justice Weimer called that out as policy language that forces an appropriation in a future year. In other words, it's not formula, it's policy. So under the direction of Ms. Orange Jones, our staff tried to recreate the effect of that in a formula. So what you have here is, rather than a bunch of policy-making steps, you have just numbers. 3855 times 2.75 plus 3855 times the whole number of years since 2013-14. Now, this is a 14-15 formula, so the whole number of years since 2013-14 is 1. But let's say we pass this, and let's say next year the legislature rejects it. The whole number of years would be 2. Let's say they rejected it again. The whole number of years would be 3. So you're creating a growth factor by way of a formula, rather ingeniously, I might add, rather than by way of policy language, which Justice Weimer had said is likely unconstitutional.
And over my objection, I might say.
Yes, courageously as well.
So the 2.75 basically is an inflation factor is now part of the formula.
Okay.
So any subsequent year that is not passed, that would take effect, and there would be the increase of 2.75, Mr. Lee. It is a little bit awkward when you read it, I suppose, but that is mathematical.
It still looks to me like it's just not there for this first year.
You're right, it's not. It's not. This is a growth factor in anticipation of any year in which the legislature rejects it.
Let's move to the next item.
The next item is item 4, consideration of executive session regarding the annual evaluation of the state superintendent of education. And board members, you have a handout at your place related to that.
Remember, we're going to need a motion, 2 motions here. One is consideration of the evaluation instrument itself. And it's been written in front of you. The second one would be then to go into executive session in order to complete the evaluation. I will briefly describe what's in front of you. Someone may already have a motion that they'd like to make or questions they may have. There is one of the indicators within the superintendent's evaluation where the data is not available. And you've been presented with 2 different scenarios of what we could possibly do here. And that indicator is graduates enroll in either college or enter the workforce. We measure the number of kids that enter college or enter the workforce as a percentage, and we put that as an indicator. Unfortunately, the data regarding entering the workforce is not available to us. So the question before you now is, do we want to proceed removing that criteria altogether, that item within the evaluation, or do we want to separate it and remove the workforce component of it, but keep the percentage of those going to college again? That's kind of the consideration before you right now. So that's I hope I gave it a decent explanation here, and I would welcome any motion in conversation to that effect on choosing either option 1 or option 2. Dr. Moranti.
I would like to move to modify the indicator to only include the college enrollment data since we don't have the workforce data.
So you are choosing item 2 as what you would ask to be approved.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second for that? I don't know if we can have a discussion. I think we'll have a discussion about it. So
I'll second.
Okay. So Ms. Bradford seconded.
Can I get a little bit of clarity?
Yes. Ms. Lee.
I'm reading this to say for this evaluation cycle, but it sounded like the motion did not indicate for this evaluation session. It sounded like it's just removal.
We can. I don't know if the maker of the motion would care to amend that we would add it back when the data is available. I'm certain she wouldn't object to that, but we can. I think that was the purpose, the intent.
I just think that would give a little clarity that it's for this particular year only.
Is the maker of the motion?
I do accept that.
Okay. And second, it's fine with that. Any other questions or comment? Mr. Carter?
Yeah, I had a concern about taking this course of action, and I wanted to share it. If you stop and think about the 2 different numbers here, I think you'll see that they are competing numbers. The number of students entering the workforce sometimes competes with the number of students that are entering college. If you have particularly a low unemployment rate like we do in Louisiana right now, you tend to have more high school graduates going straight into the job market and waiting until later to go to college. So I'm not sure that this is the situation that we have now, but I do know that we have a low employment rate in Louisiana and a tight job market. And I'm afraid that without knowing how many students went into the labor force, I can't say for sure that the number of children that we have on record as entering college isn't down more than it would otherwise be because the other number is up. So I think it could paint an unfair picture. Without having both numbers together, I don't think you get an accurate picture, and that's my concern.
Right.
So, Mr. Garvey and I have talked about this already and continue to have different opinions on it. One thing is, I believe that you can establish targets in such a way that you can honor your priorities for students to be college ready and you can honor priorities for students to be career ready. And one of the, I think because so much of our work is on preparing students to be college and career ready, I would hate to see this indicator go away. I certainly would want to have both of the statistics figured in future years, but since this is really important to the work we're doing, I think it's something that we can measure. I also, could support if the board felt strongly to leave it off this year and include it back in next year, then I would be more than happy to do that. I just think it's something that we've prioritized in our policy, so I think it's something that we can measure, and that we have to establish targets based on the information that we have, knowing that we want to grow both things so that our kids are college and career ready.
Carl?
Yeah, I had another point. When we set the goal for this, for just the college part, did we know at that time whether or not the legislature was going to raise the tuition on the college students, which would affect the number of students able to enter college as opposed to going into the workforce directly?
I don't think we knew that. Of course, I'm not an expert on college tuition.
You didn't know that at all? Well, I don't remember that issue coming up, but I think it's a point that either we should have considered or we maybe should adjust the numbers now to take into consideration what happened, which was, I believe, tuition was raised in all the colleges around the state.
You have a comment? I mean, I will weigh in to some extent. I really want this to be, I plan on breaking the tie. If there's a tie, otherwise I don't have very strong feelings. I think both sides are accurate. I think college-bound student, measuring that is very critical to what we do. I also think what Mr. Garvey says, which is one probably does affect the other, is probably true as well. So I could certainly go either direction. I would tend to agree with Mr. Garvey that the two are somewhat connected, and to disconnect them in this might not be the most effective way, but I don't feel so strongly about it that I'm going to argue. So we have a motion and a second on the table, and unless somebody wants to make a substitute motion, we will go with Dr. Moranti's motion first, and I'll ask if there's any objection to Dr. Moranti's motion. Hearing none, so moved. So what we will do is for this year only, we will remove the workforce indicator and proceed on with the evaluation, putting it back in future years. So what we're going to need to do now is I need to ask for a motion to go into executive session for the evaluation of the State Superintendent of Education. Motion by Ms. Smith, second by Dr. Beebe. We will take a roll call vote. I will remind you that it takes a 2/3 affirmative vote to enter into executive session. I also will remind the public there will be no votes taken while in executive session. Any votes that will be taken in public. So we have a motion, we have a second, we need a roll call vote in order to enter executive session.
Yes, sir. Dr. Beebe?
Yes.
Dr. Beebe votes yes. Ms. Bophy?
Yes.
Ms. Bophy votes yes. Ms. Bradford?
Yes.
Ms. Bradford votes yes. Mr. Garvey?
Yes.
Mr. Garvey votes yes. Mr. Gio is absent. Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Hill votes yes. Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Lee votes yes. Dr. Moranti?
Yes.
Dr. Moranti votes yes. Ms. Orange Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Orange Jones votes yes. Ms. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Smith votes yes. Mr. Romer, do you wish to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Romer votes yes. You have the necessary 2/3 vote to go into executive session.
I'll again, we'll restate no vote to be taken while in executive session, and we will go proceed. I don't know how long Kelly he will be. I'll estimate 30 minutes, but perhaps longer, or perhaps shorter.
Mr. Long, I do need clarification. Someone made the statement, it could have been you, that we won't take a vote in executive session. So our role is to evaluate Superintendent Pay, as I understand, with the personnel evaluation, it is not to be publicly disclosed unless he so chooses to disclose it. Am I correct?
I think our policy is to indicate whether there was a satisfactory or unsatisfactory result, and then if he cares, if the superintendent cares to elaborate himself on the details, then he can do so.
Thank you.
I want to make sure I'm correct in that. Is that
Otherwise, everything else is confidential and all the discussion inside, if that room is confidential.
any other questions? Thank you. Superintendent did receive a favorable evaluation for the record. So moved. Both of you?
Yes.
Second. By Ms. Bradford. Hearing no further discussion on item, we move to thank you.
The next item is item 5, report by the State Superintendent of Education.
Feels a little anticlimactic, to be honest. I guess it's not for those of you who weren't in the room. I will tweet out for members of the media, I will tweet out my evaluation as I did last year. Well, Twitter is a new technology it's all over the place. I'll share it. I'll brief you later. I just want to give a quick legislative update. We are now nearly 6 weeks into a 12-week session, and I will just give you some highlights. There are, I believe, Representative Smith, you can fathom this, 150 education bills this session. It is the most ever education bills. That's not the exact number, it's something like that. On the House side, we have legislation related to charter schools, standards, assessment, to private school vouchers. We have technology, data privacy, curriculum, and parental approval of curriculum. Upcoming, we have special education, and we have teacher evaluation legislation as well. If I were to say that the highlights on the House side, I think to date, have included working on Representative Schroeder's data privacy bill, which I think in its original incarnation we thought posed some real challenges to just giving kids some basic rights. However, now we feel very positive about it. There's still some tweaks to be made, but we feel very good about it when it gets to the Senate side. Representative Fannon's career diploma bill adopts many of the policies that you've adopted, and Representative Fannon was good enough to reflect them in his bill, but it will expand access to career education and Jumpstart programs significantly, and I'm very grateful to Representative Fannon for his work on that bill. On the Senate side, so far the highlight has been Senator Appel's textbook adoption bill. Senator Appel is essentially, with Representative Hoffman on the House side, rewritten the textbook adoption process, including significant parental input at the local level. And all of that is very favorable and is moving forward. And we're hearing some early childhood legislation tomorrow that I'm very excited about as well. So in spite of all of the coverage going so much toward Common Core and such things, really the most of the bills are about very substantive questions, and we're moving things ahead. So I feel great about it. We'll be halfway done with the session as of this Friday, and look forward to reporting on a successful session at the next meeting in June. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any comments regarding that report before we move to the next item? Next item, please.
The next item is item 6.1, the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee.
Ms. Bradford?
Yes, on behalf of the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 4, noting that motions 1 and 3 are notices by Ms. Smith.
Second.
There's a motion and there's a proper second. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved.
The next item is item 6.2, Administration and Finance Committee, Mr. Neal.
On behalf of the Administration and Finance Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 106.
There is a motion, there's a second by Ms. Wilkie. Any discussion? Ms. Beebe.
I would
Dr. Beebe, I'm
like
sorry.
to have the record reflect that in item 2.1, I recused myself. 3.1, I recused myself. 4.1, there was a recusal. 4.2, I voted no. And 5.2, I retrieved the Teach for America contract, and I voted no on that specific item.
Did you capture all that? Thank you, Dr. Beebe. Ms. Smith?
And with the 5.2 or 4.2 on the, the $1 million contract?
4.2.
4.2, I believe.
Okay, so I voted no on that.
I just need to
And
recuse.
Ms.
I'd like to
Jones?
recuse on the record to, item 7787.
Item 77.
And I'd like to note that on 4.2 and 5.2 that I will.
Voted no.
Any other comments? Any other objection other than those noted on for the record? Hearing none, motion passes. Next item.
The next item is item 6.3, Committee of the Whole, RSD Matters Only, Administration and Finance Committee, Mr. Garvey.
Yes, before going to this, Mr. President, I'd like to take a minute of personal privilege. Earlier today, made a reference to St. Tammany Parish and a letter that I received from a student talking about an incident that happened during the LEAP testing. And I passed that letter on to the superintendent. I think those of you who know me know that I am proud of St. Tammany and the record that they have produced, one of the highest performing parishes in our state, and the highest SAT scores of any parish in the state. My thought about St. Tammany is when you're doing such a good job that you really have nothing to hide. Apparently, though, someone either in the audience here or online felt differently. Either they were not as proud of St. Tammany Parish or they were not as confident of St. Tammany Parish as I am, because they saw what I did as an insult or somehow disparaging of St. Tammany Parish. To show just how wrong that feeling or that interpretation was, or appears to be wrong to me, I'm proud to say that I have found out since this morning that St. Tammany actually self-reported this incident. St. Tammany was confident enough to self-report this, which makes it a public record, and they were confident in their own ability to handle this situation. And they began investigating the situation on the day that it happened. I'm proud of St. Tammany, and I'm glad that the St. Tammany administration is proud of itself and confident in its ability. Now, moving on to my assignment here. This is the Administration and Finance on behalf of the
Committee of Whole.
Committee of the Whole.
Administration.
I have one for the finance and one for the innovation and turnaround. I move approval of items 1 through 10. Okay. Okay.
Second for that? Dr. Moranti, second. Is that right, Mr. Garvey?
I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know, but I'm sure,
I'd for us correctly.
We have
I will be told.
We have a motion,
That
we
it-
have a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, so moved.
Excuse me, Mr. Young, I don't know if this is the proper time, but I'd like to have a point of personal privilege. I don't know if you want to wait till you finish this.
Hey, did you have one more, Mr. Garvey, on your?
I have two more.
Okay, well, that, and then I'll come to you, Ms. Hill.
Or, on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, this time the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I move approval for motions 1 and 2.
Motion, second by Mr. Gio. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none. Next item.
The next
Next
item
item,
is Educator Effectiveness Committee.
Then you come back.
Ms. Bope.
On behalf of the Educator Effectiveness Committee, I move to approve motions 1 through 8, noting that motion 2 is a notice of intent.
We have a motion for approval. We have a second by Ms. Bradford. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved.
The next item is School Innovation and Turnaround Committee. Mr. Gardner.
Third and final time, on behalf of the School Innovation and Turnaround Committee, I move approval of item 1.
There's a motion, and there is a second by Ms. Bradford. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. I'd like to recognize Ms. Hill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Garvey received an anonymous letter from, I don't know, a student or a parent. I don't know, I haven't seen the letter. But I'm glad that this opportunity has presented itself. Because I would like to ask Superintendent White, because I represent East Baton Rouge Parish School District. And we have had an incident where the district has self-reported allegations to the department. The department took upon themselves because they received a random call or anonymous call to do an extensive investigation of the district. And I hope that the same process will apply to St. Tammany as well. And I understand that they reported, just as EBR reported their incident. However, the department took upon themselves to say, well, we have received an anonymous call and we're going to do an intensive investigation of the magnitude that EBR has been under the microscope. And so I hope that this allegation that has been presented, that the department would do the same in regards to the procedure and investigation what they have done to EBR in regards to this allegation as well, to make sure that the process is fair across the board. Superintendent White. And I would expect that as a board member as well.
We will follow the same procedures for any test cheating allegations in any district across the state.
And when you say the same procedures in regards to, and I asked you verbally, have we ever had an audit of this magnitude that has been done to EBR across the state? And you told me this has been the first time. Now, for whatever reason, the department made that decision based on an anonymous call. Here we have the same situation in another district, and I hope the same procedure and protocol is followed to the same magnitude. That's all I have to say.
Just for the record, this is a bit of a different situation. That was a student who had graduated without having the same number of credits needed to graduate. This is a test cheating case, potential test cheating case, self-reported. And we're going to follow different procedures for different things, but I totally take your point. If we become aware of any student who's graduated without having the requisite number of credits, we will do the same thing we did in Baton Rouge.
Just as I repeated before, and I understand you said it's alleged cheating. However, the department, the local school district reported it to the department. Just as St. Tammany reported it to the department, EBR reported it to the department of the allegations and what has transpired in the investigation. And I understand you guys had to go a step further, but I hope that the same procedures and protocol is in regards to St. Tammany as well.
Mr. Bobby, with all due respect, I really appreciate your hand being up, but I'm going to move on if we may.
I'd ask for 30 seconds to point out a difference between the situations. One, in St. Tammany, there is an accusation of a student doing something that was inappropriate. I don't think that that's the case in Baton Rouge. I think there's accusations that the administration in Baton Rouge did something appropriate.
And that's incorrect as well. Just put that on the record too.
We can keep talking about East Baton Rouge cheating, or we can move on. I don't know what would you like to do.
That's it. We can move on.
Okay, thank you. Next item.
The next and final item is item 7.1. Receive the resolution from St. Martin Parish School Board regarding the adoption and support of the 2014 Louisiana School Board Association legislative framework.
I still move.
Motion by Ms. Beebe, second by Ms. Bradford. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, so moved. Next item.
That's it.
That concludes our business. I appreciate everybody's time today, and we are adjourned. Thank you.